Hi, I'm Curtis, and welcome to Seestar for Dummies. If you haven't already watched the first Seestar for Dummies video, I suggest you go watch that first before this video. Put the link for that video down below where it says more, or you can press on this link here, go watch that video first, and then come back to this. In this sequel to the original Seestar for Dummies video, I'm going to show you how to do solar, lunar, and planetary imaging. There I'm going to show you how to adjust both the exposure and the gain to bring out the best possible detail in the images. And then I'm going to show you how to enhance the images that you can capture by capturing a 20 or 30-second video and then using the live stacking feature all within Seestar itself to bring out even more detail. I'm going to show you some additional optional accessories that I think you might want to consider. I should first point out this is not a sponsored video. I'm making this on my own. I purchased the Seestar and all the accessories myself. Also, if you find this video useful and you learn something from it, please like the video. That makes it easier for other people to find it. And you might also want to subscribe so you can be alerted when I post future videos like this one. So I'm going to first start with some optional accessories. And even though I showed this in the previous video, I think it's worth mentioning again. This is a 3-point leveling system that fits between the Seestar and the tripod leg. Now you can level this with the tripod leg itself, but using this 3-point leveling system is so much easier. I'll put links to this down below the video. I purchased this one on Amazon, and I can pretty much guarantee you that the ones on Amazon are made in the same factory as those by the Astronomy retailers. They just add about $10 to the price. But it's up to you which one you want to purchase. Now, do you absolutely have to have one of these? Do you absolutely have to level it? You don't absolutely have to level the Seestar when you're doing nighttime deep sky objects, because plate solving will help the Seestar figure out where it's pointing and how to find and track the next object you tell it to go to. But leveling it will make it so much easier to find the first object, and the whole process will go much faster. Now, plate solving is not possible in the daytime, so if you're imaging the sun or the moon during the day, you definitely need to level this one way or another. And as I said, I recommend the 3-point leveling system. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, you want to keep the Seestar as low to the ground as possible to minimize any chance of vibrations from winds or whatever. But in my case, there are places in my yard where I want to set up that I have obstacles in the path, and I have to elevate the Seestar. So you can get an aftermarket tripod. The one I have here, which I think is very good, is the Skywatcher Star Adventurer. It's the tripod that comes with the Skywatcher AZ GTI Alt-Az mount, and the Seestar just screws on top of that. You can also put the 3-point leveling system in between. Now, I would also recommend weighing this down. You can put rocks, bag of sand. If you already have a counterweight for your telescope, that could fit right here on the accessory tray. And if you're on wet dirt or grass, you might want to put some pads down at the bottom so it doesn't sink in on one side or the other and shift during the night. You can make your own pads like I did out of pieces of wood, or you can get fancy and get something like these anti-vibration pads that are made for telescopes that not only help prevent the tripod from sinking into the ground, but also help dampen out any vibrations of people walking nearby. Now, another item that I think is worth having as an accessory is a dew shield. So if you're not in a heavy dew environment, but you will get some dew, the dew shield might obfuscate the need to turn on the dew heater. That way you can save power so you can run longer. The other thing about the dew shield is it's actually a light shroud, and so it helps prevent stray light from sneaking in to the optical axis and washing out the background. And that's important when we're looking at some very dim deep sky objects. And that can be particularly true when you have this low to the ground. There's always a lot of light sources that can impinge on the optics in that case. Now, you can purchase one of these aftermarket dew shields. They're pretty inexpensive. Seems like most of them are made on 3D printers. They're made out of plastic, so beware. You need to make sure you take it off before you shut down the Seestar or close the arm, because if you don't take it out, it can jam into the base when the arm is closing, and it could potentially damage the altitude motor or gears. Now, what I did is purchase for less than $1 a sheet of black matte construction foam, and I cut out my own dew shield. Just measured the circumference, cut a piece that length and the width that I wanted the dew shield to stick out, and that cost me less than $1. Not only that, it's soft and flexible. I've tested this by closing the arm with this foam dew shield in place, and it basically just crumples up and falls off. So it's less likely to cause damage. I'm not saying it won't cause damage. It's always better to take any accessory that sits on the front, other than a lens cover that's very thin and sits flat. Everything else should be taken off before you close the arm and shut down the system. So now we're going to take a look at how you can view the sun with the Seestar. And you have to make doggone certain that you have the solar filter on the front of the Seestar. Even make sure when you first turn this on that it doesn't accidentally point in the direction of the sun before you get the filter on, because it'll cook your sensor inside and that'll be toast. Now, for the sun, we want to make sure that we go through the level procedure, because obviously there are no visible stars during the day, and so the Seestar can't count on plate solving to find the sun. Now, you might think that finding the sun is pretty easy manually. It's a big object up there. But the reality is it isn't that easy. If you want to be able to find the sun manually, there are devices that you can purchase or even make yourself that enable you to find the sun relatively easily. Here's an example of one from Telview. It's called the Soul Searcher. Basically has two metal discs. The front has a small hole in it. The back has a translucent surface where the light from the sun will impinge if you're lined up on the sun. So this is actually very easy to use. It's lightweight. It could be Velcroed to the top of the Seestar without worrying about when it closes crashing or anything like that. So if you want to do it manually, something like this would help you. I'll put a link below the video so you can find that. Other than that, we're ready to go. So now let's go take a look at the sun. We're going to use solar system, so tap on that. And the sun, we're going to say go to. So it's at 20 degrees setting in the southwest right now. And you see the prompt to make sure that you put that on. But as I said before, make sure it's not opening up and pointing close to the sun to begin with before you put that filter on. Every time I've tried to do the sun, it has been successful at finding and centering it, although it does take maybe a minute or two. Sometimes it zips right by the sun like that before it really finds it and centers it. So just let it do its thing. See, it just sort of passed it by. Now it's kind of homing in on it. So the answer is no, it's not in the center. Okay, so this time, and make me a liar, it didn't exactly center it, but we can fix that. So let's go to the icon, which is the joystick. So you tap that question mark, you'll see which one is the joystick. Open that up. You can do fast, tap on fast, or slow, tap on slow. I highly recommend slow because fast, it'll go off the screen and you'll get lost. Okay, so we want to take the center button and move it to the left, and that'll bring the thing over. Okay, pretty good. Let's bring the center button down to the bottom. Oops, sorry, the other way. There we go. And again, a little bit to the left. Okay, so we're done with that. Let's tap on the joystick icon to get rid of it. Now let's focus. So there's two ways of focus. We can focus on that sunspot by putting that white box around the sunspot and hit autofocus. And it's done. Looks pretty good focus. We could also do an edge focus by tapping on the edge with that white box. And you got to be quick, hit autofocus. Okay, still looks like a pretty good focus. Let's go zoom in with the 2x down below. And we can even do 4x. and things are out of the field of view. That sunspot is out of the field of view. Let's bring this back down. I'm using my finger on my iPhone to slide this thing around. There's a nice big cluster of sunspots. Let me move it over. So I'm not even using the joystick. I'm just doing on the iPhone itself. So we can go back to 1x to fit everything in the field of view. I'm going to slide it over a little bit more, and a little bit up, maybe a little bit back. There we go. And then if I tap the icon in the upper right that looks like Saturn with a broken box around it, that will keep the target centered. So it'll keep that thing in the center of the field of view. Now the other thing we can do here, we can take photos and videos, but before we get to that, let's talk about the exposure setting. So on the right hand side is the plus or minus with a circle around it. Tap on that, and there's auto and manual. If I tap manual, I have exposure and gain. If I tap auto, I just have the brightness. And I can take this slider and increase the brightness. That'll blow this thing out. It's way too much. I can bring it down to the other extreme, and that's way too little. So it will automatically pick the brightness it thinks makes the most sense, and it did a pretty good job there. Let's go into the manual mode. We can adjust the exposure. So you see exposure, it's at 296. And the one thing I think they should do is leave that on the screen until I tap to get rid of it, because it goes away quickly. So there's microseconds. Excuse me, we're on milliseconds, so that's 1 millisecond. And then microseconds, 1,000 microseconds is 1 millisecond. So if we wanted to reduce the exposure, we could go down here. And so you have the option, a range of exposures from 30 microseconds up to 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. That will be way overexposed. Yes, it's way overexposed. Go back to the microseconds. Yeah, there we go. That's the better exposure. And then down below is the gain. And the gain is another way to boost the signal, but it also can boost the noise. So we'll talk about the gain more when we do deep sky objects at night. But there it is. And you see some air turbulence because it is lower in the sky. It's about 20, 22 degrees. But you can see all those sunspots, and you can see that the image fits in the field of view with a little room to spare. Now, if I want to take a photo, I would simply tap, and I'm keeping the selection there. And then if I go to the lower left where you see the sun, that takes me to my phone. So there's the image of the sun captured to my phone. And then on the Seestar, there's nothing there right now because we didn't do anything. So I could also do a video. I tap that. It'll start the video, and you see in the upper right-hand corner, the red box, and you see 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Tap on that. Then we go to the Seestar. Now there's our video right here. Tap on it, and you'll see it plays the video. It looks like it was about a 10-second video. Okay, so there you have it, the sun with the Seestar. Tonight is a very nice and clear night with my Bortle 6.5 skies. The seeing is fair, and the moon is more than 60%. So tonight we're going to take a look at what the Seestar can do with the moon, and then also with some of the planets. And as I warned you before, Seestar is not really designed for planets. They're going to look awfully small, and we'll be lucky if we see any detail. But I want you to see what the Seestar is capable of with the planets, so you don't get the wrong impression and get discouraged when you don't see something like you see in a magazine. I have the Seestar mounted on my Skywatcher tripod tonight to get a little elevation, and I've already pre-leveled it. So let's get started. Let's take a look at the moon first. Now, obviously, I wouldn't recommend having a bright red light shining on you, but I want you to be able to see me, and I don't think it'll interfere with bright objects like the moon and the planets, especially since it's not pointing directly into the scope. So let's get going to the moon, tapping on solar system. If we tap on the moon, we get detailed information about the moon, and we see the moon as at an elevation of 68 degrees. And we can hit go gazing at the bottom, and it's just checking. So it's off to find the moon. Yeah, just like with the sun, sometimes it passes by before it zeroes in on it. And it did a nice job of centering it. And it has a nice exposure and looks pretty sharp. Let's zoom in. There could be, you can see some turbulence in the air, even though it's very high in the sky. As I said, the seeing is only fair. So let's do an autofocus. Let's zoom in and pick some craters and hit the autofocus button. Yeah, that looks much better. So shrink it down. And again, we could do the autofocus on the edge as well, but I think we got a pretty good focus here. And you can zoom in to X, and I think 4X might be pushing it here with the seeing conditions. And I can use my finger to move this around a little bit. Just when you're zoomed in, it's easy to lose it. There we go. Now I can zoom in on the polar region here. And let's move this up a little bit and do a 4X. There you go. You can see the limb of the moon, and you can go around, see what you want. Let's go back to 1X. As I showed you before with the sun, you can use the joystick. Works the same here as it will for the sun. We can tap to keep the target centered. That's where it thinks the center is. And we can tap up here and clear everything out. So yeah, that's sort of the center of the field of view of my iPhone. And we could, tapping on the plus minus, we can get down here and adjust the exposure in the auto mode. What that means is we're changing the exposure. It can adjust the gain accordingly. But what I found so far is it does a pretty good job of picking the exposure. Let's turn off this. See, that little button was still there. Let's turn that off and then go back to this. And as I showed you with the sun, we can do the exposure independently and the gain independently, but we don't need to do that here. Want to take a picture? There's the picture. Go back over here. Here's our shot of the moon. Can expand it. Looks really nice. It's amazing what this thing can do. And the focal length is just ideal for fitting the sun and the moon in that field of view. You see, there's plenty of room on either side. If this were a full moon, it would all fit in there just fine. No problem at all. Okay, so nice job on the moon, Seestar. Let's go see what you can do on the planets. So now we want to go to Jupiter, and let's tap on the solar system. You see Jupiter's at an altitude of 63 degrees. Hit the go to. Okay, so there's Jupiter. You can actually see Jupiter. You can see 1, 2, 3, 3 of its moons right now. And it's seriously overexposed, and it's obvious when you can see the moons, you know you're overexposed. You won't get the moons at the same exposure that you will get detail on the planet. So we're way overexposed. But before I do that, let's tap on the icon on the upper right. That's the target correction, so it'll keep that in the center of the field of view. We've already focused. You can always try to focus on the planet. For instance, let me show you. Before I do the autofocus, I want to see where the focus is at the moment. So I'll tap on the 3 dots in the upper right corner. And the manual focus panel, I'll slide that to the right. Tap here to remove that. And you see it's at 1582. So let's go ahead and close that out. And then tap on here. So that's our focus area right there. And hit autofocus. And we'll come back and see if it focused at the same point, 1582. All right, let's tap on the 3 dots, hit the panel. Now, you see it really didn't do a good job of focusing. So let's try again. Yeah, and that's why I like to focus on a star field. And in this case, let's change the focus back. I'm going to use the manual controls. I'm using the double down arrows. We're at, whoop. Yeah, I'm going to use the arrows down. So we're a long way off here. Let's get back to where we were, 1582. And you have to wait, give it time to do the focus. Okay, so that's a demonstration of why I like to focus on the star field before I go to the planet rather than try to focus on the planet. I think that does a better job. Now we're way overexposed, so let's hit the exposure tool, the lightness adjust they call it. I got that by tapping on the question mark. So tap on the lightness adjust. You see it's red. Instead of auto, let's go into manual. And I can pretty much assure you it's best to go with gain of 0. You don't need gain on something bright like the planets. We use gain on dim deep sky objects. And then let's adjust the exposure down. Now, where the best exposure will be depends on how close Jupiter is to us, so how bright it is, and your sky conditions. We're all using the same scope with the same camera, and I think let's try 200. I think that's still going to be too much. And you have to give it a little time to settle in. We can zoom in. I can still see the moons. Actually, can see 4 moons now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's adjust this down even further to, let's see, 100. And zoom in on that. I still can't see any bands. So let's drop the exposure down still further. That's going to be too much. But you see, we're getting close. So it's so bright, because it is actually pretty close to us, that we want a fairly low exposure. And let's zoom in. Now I'm starting to see 1, 2 bands now. Let's adjust the exposure down. 1 more notch is all I can do. 5. I think that's probably the best. If I try to go down 1 more, it gets too dim. Yeah, somewhere right in there. This tool, ZWO, needs to make it so that it doesn't disappear based on some timing. You should have to click it, tap it a second time to make it disappear, because it's pretty much a pain in the butt that way. Okay, so let's try it there. That looks pretty good, around 4. That's 4 milliseconds. All right, so I can actually see the bands. Let's move this over in the center. And how good you'll be able to see the bands obviously depends on your seeing. In my case, you can see a lot of turbulence there, so the seeing isn't that great. Let's capture a photo by tapping. And now there's one more thing we can do. We can actually stack a bunch of images and hopefully bring out a little more detail. And we're going to do that in the video mode. Go over to video, and then we're going to tap on the raw. So when that's red, go ahead and hit the video again. Now in the upper right corner, you see it's counting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's do 30 seconds. All right, that's good enough. Tap the video button again. We saved the video. And then let's go to the lower right corner, and that brings us to the saved images. So where it says saved at the top, that's saved to my phone. Let's go to the Seestar, which is the Seestar drive. And the one on the left is my one I just took. And you see in the upper left-hand corner it says raw. And there's the image. Look how tiny it is. Let's play it. Zoom in on it. So these are successive frames in the video. All right, so let's finish that. So there's the video of Jupiter, the 33 seconds. In the upper right-hand corner, let's hit stack. Oh, I forgot one thing. We actually have to go back to this, and we have to get out of here. So the top left corner, hit the down arrow, and we're out of that. So we can go back to My Albums, back to Seestar, back to Planetary, the one on the left, and hit stack. Now it'll go off, and it'll take some time. And you can see it's at 4%. And so let's just let this run to 100%. Okay, so it's finished. That took 8 minutes and 37 seconds, so 8.5 minutes to stack all of those frames in the 33-second video. And let's go take a look, see how it did. Okay, so in the upper left-hand corner, you see some symbol for stacking. And let's zoom in. And there it is. Much better than the view that we had, the single image view. So now you can clearly see there are 2 bands. And if the seeing was better, you would see even more sharp detail. So I think a pretty decent job on the planet Jupiter. Now I also took a look at both Saturn and Mars. Saturn's low in the sky in the west at this time of year. And when I tried to image it, it's just bouncing around in the field of view because of all the turbulence in the air, especially when you're looking through that much atmosphere with the planet that low in the sky. I could barely tell that there might be a ring around the object I was looking at, and I knew it was Saturn because of its location and its brightness, but it really wasn't much to look at. Mars, on the other hand, rose much later, and I was able to take a look at it when it was high in the sky and not looking through too much atmosphere. But the seeing condition is not that great, and here's what it looked like. Now, aside from the fact that you can tell it's the red planet from its color, you really can't see any detail at all. And I really wasn't able to do any better than this using the video capture and live stacking. Now, I have seen much, much better images of both Saturn and Mars that other folks have been able to capture. But as I said earlier in the video, at a focal length of 250 millimeters, the Seestar is really not designed for planetary imaging. In fact, it's the exact opposite of what you would want. You would want something at 3,000 millimeters focal length or more in order to capture a really dramatic picture of a planet. Nonetheless, as you saw with Jupiter, if you get lucky under the right conditions, if you have good seeing, dark skies, and the planet is high in the sky, you can actually make out some detail on the planet, and you can even see some of the larger moons. All in all, I would say the Seestar works quite well as a solar and lunar imager. You could clearly see lots of sunspots when we took a look at the sun. If we had taken a video of the sun and used the stacking feature in Seestar, in the Seestar app, we could have brought out more detail in those sunspots if we wanted to. The same is true for the moon. Does an excellent job on the moon, and again, video capture and stacking will sharpen up the craters and structures on the moon. So thank you for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this video and you learned something from it. Please don't forget to like it and subscribe so you can see future videos when I produce them. Until then, clear skies.